please open your camera. And anyone else who would like to open your camera, it's very nice if you can be still to open camera and to say hi to our guest and to welcome them with much energy, with much joy. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn this over to you now.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. I don't want to shock you, but I had a little skin damage, sun damage on my face. So I had a surgery a week ago. It's healing beautifully, but it's better to keep it covered. It's not uncomfortable. So if you'd rather, I can stay off video, but I just thought we're all friends and family, and just to accept that reality, brief period of my life where I have a bandage on my face. So we'll begin now. And I also wanted to mention one thing. Supriya mentioned the meditation for Swami's Moksha Day on April 21st. We also will be having a 3-hour meditation from Swamiji's apartment here at Ananda Village, Crystal Hermitage, from 7 to 10 Pacific Daylight Time, but that will be live streamed. And I believe Sahaja, who's with us this morning, if anybody wants to join in, she'll be sending a link to all of you. So that's another option. Okay, so Jyotish will begin now. And I'm going to go off camera while
we'll move this over and I'll be on camera, and then when Devi's going to speak, she'll be on camera. So it's a very interesting reading this morning. Just a moment. Okay. It's the spiritual path that we're on is both so very clear and yet so very subtle. And so the reading this morning about the, if you're doing good deeds, you're fine with letting those be known. And if you're doing bad deeds, you want to keep that hidden. That's from the Bible. And then the passage from the Gita showing, the various ways, one could say levels of worshiping the God here in the form of Krishna, but it could be God in the form of Jesus. It could be God in the form of Divine Mother, any form whatsoever. It's clinging to the consciousness of God. So those two were in the reading from this morning, but there's another kind of interesting concurrence that happened. And this is what I want to talk about this morning. One of our members here takes each year, he does a little day-by-day calendar, one of those tear-off calendars. And it's a little quote from the autobiography of a yogi. And so every day we have this little calendar that we see a quote from the autobiography. And this morning's quote was about Sri Yukteswar talking about what holds the soul to the body. And he said not only the physical body, but also the astral body and the causal body before there's complete union with God. And he said that there's one causative thread that holds the soul to the various bodies, but because we're on the physical plane, let's think of it as what's holding us into this body. And he said the single thread is desire. That according to our desires, think of it like this: every desire that you have gets to be fulfilled. And so if you have a desire for anything on the physical plane, that is basically a desire for things that we receive through the senses, then we've got an infinite amount of time. It's hard for our minds to cognize that, because here we are in one little lifetime, and just the single day seems to drag by, and a year, and then a whole lifetime, and how long that is. Well, it's not even the blink of an eye in terms of infinity. And so God is infinite consciousness, but also infinite in terms of a time scale, at least from our standpoint. And so in the midst of that, if we have a desire, we have an infinite amount of time that allows us to fulfill that desire and release it. So think of all the desires, all of the things that we have wanted and done and been nostalgic about that we didn't do and didn't complete, and all of that. And you multiply that not only by what we have in this lifetime, but you multiply that by tens of thousands of other lifetimes. And so, in a certain sense, we could say we're swimming in a sea of desires. And it's that basic, fundamental energy of desire consciousness that creates the universe. That's what God uses to create the universe. And in Patanjali, it says when the whirlpools of desire or likes and dislikes of chittva, the feeling nature, when those become calm, we automatically go into a state of union with God. Another way of stating that is that when our desires have become calmed and we no longer have even residual desires for clinging to this world, then we go into automatically a state of union with what we have always been. And so the soul is tied through the agency of desire to the various bodies that we have, and according to how strong that desire is and the direction of that desire, then we're tied more or less strongly. Now, for all of us who are practicing the techniques of yoga and have, one might say, evolved our desires to wanting, yoga is union with God. Yoga is the release of all desires, and the mere wanting of that takes an enormously long time. As Master said to, it was actually Brother Norman, who had a tendency to be a little bit moody, and he said, was complaining that, he probably wasn't a very good devotee and so on. And Master said, remember this, it takes very, 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 very good karma even to want to know God. So by the time you get to the point of wanting to know God, you have already gone through most of those levels of duality. So now we come back to the reading from the Bible and St. Matthew. And what he's saying is that those desires that are evil, or let's define evil by those that are moving away from the light, moving away from God, we want to keep those hidden. Not only do we keep them hidden from other people, we want to keep them hidden from ourselves. And one of the processes that we undergo in meditation is to try to, it's not so much that we need to understand our desires or even see them, but in meditation and the practices of meditation and Kriya Yoga, if you have Kriya initiation, all of those are to move the life force, which is, one might say, the mechanism by which desire expresses, to move that life force in a flow toward union with God. And that very fact of doing that, the practices of yoga, Master said, will free us from the karma of past desires. So all of those desires, Let's assume that in the past, because evolution generally moves in an upward direction, let's assume in the past that our desires were darker and less elevated, less God directed than they are now. Well, those desires still reside somewhere in our consciousness, but they're not expressing themselves at this point. But by the practice of Kriya Yoga and other aspects of, of meditation and leading a spiritual life, gradually the flow of life force moving toward the light obliterates those dark desires and frees us. Master said that a single Kriya will free us from as many of those past desires as an entire year of living, harmonious living. And that's the power. That's why he called Kriya Yoga and this path the jet airplane path, because it moves us much more quickly. So the desire to, or the tendency to hide those darker desires and darker actions that spring from them, from others and from ourselves, is a very natural desire. And we can't just get at them through the mind. The mind is part of the problem that hides those things from us, because the mind, in one sense, is an expression of the egoic separation that we undergo. So the releasing of those has to take place on a deeper level. A beautiful chant that we sing sometimes: do not dry the ocean of my love with the fires of my desires, with the fires of my restlessness. Another line: thee I find behind the fringe of my mind. So behind our thoughts, behind our actions, lies the realm of union with God. That's where we will find him. So coming back to this, then what it says in essence in the Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna is saying to Arjuna, he's saying, first of all, cling to me, cling with every thought. How can we cling with every thought? Well, our thoughts are going to be an expression of our desires. And so we have to gradually clear out the desires for staying manifested in a physical form, and gradually we increase the desire. It's not to lose ourselves, to become our greater selves. And so as that strengthens, then we're able to have more and more of our thoughts just about wanting to have union with God. But then he goes on to say, so clasp me with heart and mind. Heart is the desire nature, and with our thoughts, so shalt thou dwell surely with me on high. But if thy thought droops from such high, if thou beest weak to set body and mind upon me constantly, despair not. Give me lower service. So desire and restlessness are a kind of an expression of what we call the rajasic energy. And so if the rajasic energy is still more alive in us, then we give service to God. And Master said that our path is a combination of meditation, which is union with God, and service to him, because we find ourselves in this physical body. We find ourselves in a position now where we aren't meditating 18 hours a day and have basically no other thoughts. So we give service to God, and that energy directed toward him, coming back to the Bible, Our actions then, when we're serving God, are actions of delight. And we're happy to have others see those actions and thoughts and deeds and words of ours. So he's saying, if you're a little bit more rajasic, then serve me. And if you're more rajasic than that, even give me your failures. We may think, oh, what a terrible thing that is. But the fact is that that's even to want to give your failures to God takes very, 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 very good karma, because you're still self-offering to God. And so from one standpoint, it's a long process of spiritual evolution. From another standpoint, it's just a simple play of God's. He's letting us play in different forms, he is us, and he's playing in different forms at different levels, and just according to the complex pattern of what we want in our conscious mind and in our subconscious mind, we release more and more and go toward him. And I'll just end by, since we can't access easily the things underneath our conscious mind, then our job is to try to align our thoughts and actions and deeds with our higher goals, and to do our practices, which I said will clear out the karma, whether we're aware of it or not. Our spiritual practices clear that out. So this is a very deep subject, very deep passage from both the Bible and the Gita, but it is also a very beautiful expression of the subtle energy of our path. And now Devi will speak.
So I hope I'm not too shocking to you with it doesn't hurt at all. It just, the skin needs to be protected. And as it says in the Gita, I give you my imperfections. So here I am. So, one of the important things about this passage, particularly, well, the two together, the one saying we tried to hide our darkness, our limitation, our imperfections from the light, from God, because we're ashamed. And then the Gita says, give me whatever you could give me. And we're so used to, this is a very important thing for devotees to realize, because we are so used, we've been brought up in the Christian Judeo tradition where God is a God of judgment. And there's the Sistine Chapel with, the sinners being condemned to hell and the righteous being going up to heaven. But this is not the truth of it. The truth is that God loves us. He loves us as his children. There's one of my favorite passages from the Bible is the story of when a woman is taken in adultery. She's an adulteress. And according to Hebrew law, a terrible kind of decree, she's to be stoned to death. And the crowd with, vengeance and blood in their mind, all have stones and they've encircled her. They're about to stone her to death. What a horrible thing to do. And Jesus is sitting there quietly on the side. And there, of course, the hypocritical Jews are always testing him. And they said, Rabbi, according to the Bible, this woman should be stoned to death. What do you say, according to the law? And Christ it said, drawing in the sand. He doesn't even look up. And he said, let he among you who is without sin cast the first stone. So that's our guideline on how to judge other people. Are any of us without imperfection? When we are, then maybe we can judge other people. But God doesn't judge us. And Christ, the one by one, the story continues. The men drop their stones and disappear, and the woman is left there, traumatized. And what does Christ say to her? He says, go out and sin no more. And that's what God is telling us. Whatever we've done in the past, we can change it now. And here we all are on this beautiful path that Master has given us. And as we've been saying, we need to appreciate that it takes very good karma to even get to this point. And so how can we relate to God now? Do we hide our mistakes from him? Are we ashamed? And no, we don't need to do that. And in fact, it's counterproductive. What we need to do is offer them to God. Say, God, I have a trouble with smoking or drinking or sexual desire or greed for money or whatever it is. And just say, that's where I am now, but it's not where I want to be. And then when we do that, God can step in and help us. On a very mundane level, some of you may have heard me tell this story before, but Swami Kriyananda was so forgiving. I mean, he didn't judge anybody. And he just accepted, as long as you were sincere and you were trying, he was there for you. And one man who was very kind of moody and mercurial, kind of not dependable fellow, he had been in charge of our retreat. And right before the big event, Spiritual Renewal Week, he quit, leaving the rest of the staff kind of, in chaos. What do we do now? And I remember we went to Swamiji and said, Swami, this fellow has quit and nobody wants to work with him now. I mean, he's caused such, chaos in his wake. And Swami, what did he say? Oh, that's a terrible thing to do. Oh, I'm going to have to talk with him. He shouldn't have been that irresponsible. What he said was, gosh, if no one else wants to work with him, I guess I'll hire him on my staff. That was his response. And again, to move in this world without judging other people, without judging ourselves. And, I hear a lot from people who are newer on the path. Two people have used this expression to me. They said, I feel like I'm an imposter because I don't feel I'm totally committed to God. Don't ever think that way. If there's one little thread of your consciousness that wants to know God, you're not an imposter. Sure, we all have these desires that Jyotish has been talking about. Sure, we all are compelled by Raja Guna, the activating quality in life, to engage in the world. But that doesn't mean we're imposters. Trust your own sincerity. It's so important. It frees up so much energy. And Swami said once that one of Satan's biggest tools, you can always recognize if something is coming from a divine source or a dark source. The dark source makes you feel diminished about yourself. This God makes you feel accepting of your own goodness. And so whenever you feel you're an imposter, you're a hypocrite, you're not good enough to be on the path, your meditations are terrible, stop and say, who's whispering in my ear? That's the force of darkness. What God is whispering in your ear, what Master is whispering is, you can do this. Yeah, you're beginning. That's great. Keep going, keep going. And so never accept the thought that you're not sincere, even if it's 1% of you that's wanting the spiritual path. That's still there's sincerity in that 1%. There was a man, you've heard this story, who was an alcoholic. He found Master's path, and he would do his kriyas. He would have his kriya beads in one hand and a bottle of whiskey in the other hand. And he'd do a few kriyas, take a sip, do a few kriyas. Little by little, from doing the kriyas, that day came for him and symbolically for all of us, where he threw away that desire. And that day will come for us too, where we can just say, I don't need this anymore. I'm done with it. And through the grace of God, that's one thing that I've let go of that binds me to this world. So, what are we looking for with the spiritual path? We say self realization. That's kind of a big concept. What does it mean to us? Well, let's think in terms of freedom. I want to be free. I want to be free to live in such a way that I'm expressing the highest aspiration that I have, that I can choose where I want to put my energy and that it's directed towards God. So, and what keeps us in bondage? The desires. And so, little by little, if we can just move forward, holding on to the hem of Master's robe and just say, I want to be free of all this. I want to know you. I want to feel my soul as I want it to be. I want to know it in its full expression. And we can do this. Master promised. He said, to those who stay faithfully on the path, and he said, I don't just mean out of kind of by road, okay, I do my prayers today, I do my meditation, but with devotion, with self-offering, giving God our failure all along the way. Master said, I or one of the other of our line of gurus will personally usher that person into the astral world, into the light. So the promises of the masters are so great. The promises of us being part of the light are there. We just have to stop hiding in the darkness and saying, I can't go into the light because I've made these mistakes or I have these tendencies. It's we ourselves who hold us back from the light. As soon as we say, God, I want you, he will, with the fullest commitment as we can, he will be there. And a gauge that I try to use in moving towards freedom is this. I watch my actions, I watch my words, and I think, will this action, will this speech, will this entangle me in more karma? Or will it bring freedom? And so if you, for example, if somebody does something that's offensive to you or unfair, whatever it is, if you retaliate, that just it propels the karma forward. But if you just say, all right, this happened, I don't need to react. The reactive process, desires, that's what keeps us, the whole karmic show going. But if we can say, I will, from today, I will watch my words, I will watch my actions. Can we always do it? No. But that's why it's so wonderful to have spiritual friends. When we go off, we just say, got off then. And they say, you did. Let's keep moving forward. Let's forget about the past. As Sri Yukteswar said, forget the past. The past lives of all people are dark with many shames. All things in future will improve if we are making a spiritual effort now. So it's really a thrilling concept because it makes the spiritual life so accessible. And we don't have to be anything other than we are. We just come to God in all our glory, so to speak, bandaged up, wounded, whatever. We come to God as we are, and we know unconditionally we are accepted, we are loved, and we are welcomed home in the moment that we say, I want to come home with all our hearts. So I think we'll end here. And I don't know if you all were happy to stay on for a little while. If you have any questions or comments or things you'd like to share.
No, thank you, Jyotish and Devi, for just the sharing, for the energy that you bring and add to this community here in this area. Across the world, it feels like, from California, and yet not so far. One day we'll be coming back to visit when that is possible. Many of us have already been speaking about that, so we'll be coming back to the village as soon as possible. People know now online, you can either put a question or a comment into the chat box to everyone, or you can put it privately to me or to Jyotish. It says Jyotish Novak. That would be privately to Jyotish and Devi. I will read them if they show up in the chat box, but also you can unmute yourself and just express right now. So with some sort of, we know how to do this. We've been doing it for over a year now. So I'm going to mute myself and I'll read what's in the chat box in a moment.
Okay, well, we've got the chat box up too. And so in a recent online classes, devotees have questioned how to develop devotion. Can you speak a bit more on devotion? Yes, devotion is sometimes, I don't know, a term that is easy to misunderstand. We think of devotion as kind of worshiping a photo or worshiping an image of God or something of that sort. Devotion is turning the desires that we have, our emotional entanglements, simply turning that focus of what the heart wants toward the light. And it can be turned toward a form of God, can be turned toward Master, it can be turned toward Krishna or Jesus or any of the forms, because really it's Divine Mother who has taken all of those forms. So it doesn't matter whether you worship Divine Mother in this form or in that form. It's all Divine Mother, and Divine Mother is just another term for God. So the devotion is turning the heart's energy toward God or toward one of the manifestations of God. And what Master said, his definition of meditation was meditation is focused, deep concentration on God or on one of his aspects. So that deep concentration brings us toward God. Again, in the Gita, it says, when you dwell on something, a craving for it arises. And it's talking about dwelling on sensory things, but the opposite is true. When we dwell, our mind dwells on God or some aspect of God, a craving for that arises, and that craving, one could say, is devotion.
Yeah, and it follows on what we've been talking about. We have to feel that God is on our side. To love something, we have to feel safe. We have to feel trust. And as long as we feel God's judging us, that God is going to punish us, we can't open our heart. And so that's what the gift so much of the Bhagavad Gita and the teachings of India, because it's such they have given the world this example of this deep personal relationship with God. And, you know, Swami Kriyananda, in his relationship to Master, I don't think I ever was with him for any period of time when he was, I mean, even in a car, or in a restaurant, where he wasn't, you could feel his union with Master, his love for Master. So it comes from devotion. Start with self-acceptance, then move on to the thought that you cannot hide one thing from God. God knows every one of your thoughts, every one of your desires, every one of your mistakes. There's nothing you can hide from him. And it doesn't diminish his love or her love, Divine Mother's love for us one bit. And so self-acceptance, trust, seeing God everywhere, calling on the Guru, sharing your thoughts. It's, it's like having try to have a continual, as much as you can, dialogue, loving dialogue with God. The more you do that, then it isn't just a mind-born thing, but you start feeling, oh, somebody's listening. Somebody is hearing this. Divine Mother knows she's with me this moment. So, Jyotish and I have had the good karma to be on this path for a long time. And I really have to say, it's more and more rewarding. If there's one thing we can say to you is never give up, keep trying. If you feel like your meditation and your kriya isn't very good, keep trying. You'll get there. If you feel you don't feel Master's presence, keep calling on him. You will feel it. It's the promise of the great ones, the promise of the Guru, the promise of God. We are his children, and just keep working to develop that relationship.